We're throwing it all away.
New figures show this year's military suicide rate is on pace to reach a record high. The Pentagon says there have been at least 154 suicides among active duty troops through last Thursday, a rate of nearly one each day. The figure marks an 18% increase over the same period a year ago. More U.S. soldiers have died by taking their own lives than on the battlefield. The reasons for the increase in suicides are not fully understood. Among explanations, studies have pointed to combat exposure, post-traumatic stress, misuse of prescription medications, and personal financial problems.
Every day in this country, 18 veterans are committing suicide. 17% of the individuals that are in combat in Afghanistan, my brothers and sisters, are on psychotropic medication. 20 to 50% of the individuals that are getting deployed to Afghanistan are already diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, military sexual trauma, or a traumatic brain injury. Currently, 1/3 of the women in the military are sexually assaulted. It's clear that these policies of the global war on terror has had a profound effect on the military and my brothers and sisters, while simultaneously perpetuating a failed policy. And unfortunately, we have to live with that failed policy on a daily basis, and we don't want to be a part of that failed policy anymore.
Mary Kirkland describing the suicide of her son, Derek Kirkland, who had put a gun in his mouth in Iraq. He was sent to a hospital in Germany, then sent home to Fort Lewis McChord, where he was put into the hospital and, as she described, let out, saying that he had low risk of suicide. He committed suicide the next day on March 19, 2010, after 2 tours of duty in Iraq.
Met with a psychiatrist the next day who deemed him to be low to moderate risk for suicide. His only restriction being that he was not to be around any weapons, and cleared him for him to go basically in the barracks room by himself, which I found after talking to the veterans it was illegal. He tried to kill himself again on Thursday night. He got back on the 15th and killed himself on the 19th. On the Thursday, on the 18th, he had bought some rum, so was drinking rum with his medications that they just gave him, his antidepressants and sleep medicine, and cut himself. Had blood stains all over his room. It wasn't successful, so he got up Friday morning and bandaged himself. One of his things that he wrote before he went and hung himself was, "I feel invisible. I feel like I'm transparent." And nobody walked into the room on Friday to see the blood stains. Derek didn't hang himself until the last time they had seen him was Friday night at 10 o'clock. And they found him Saturday morning at 1:30. If anybody would have walked in that room on that Friday, they didn't even, the leadership wasn't even checking on him. So this mother woke up Sunday morning at 6:30 to tell me that my son was dead, that I had let my guard down because he got back on Monday. He's back in the United States. He's safe. The Army called it a miscommunication is why my son is dead.
Aaron Glantz, you have done a lot of research on soldier suicides. Can you respond to what happened to Derek and put it in the broader context not only of soldiers, but of veterans as well?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there's many, many stories like that. I wrote a few years ago about Specialist John Fish of San Luis Obispo out here in California. He served a tour in Iraq. He was suicidal. He told his commanders he was suicidal when he was in Iraq. He came back to the United States, and they told him to just start training to go to Afghanistan. And during the training exercises, he walked out into the desert outside El Paso, and he shot himself in the head with a military-issued weapon. We've been at war for 10 years. We have 2.5 million Americans who have served in these wars. About 1 million of them are still in the military, and 1.5 million of them are out in the military and are now veterans. We have 18 veterans who commit suicide every day in this country. We haven't asked people to go through war in this kind of way, probably since World War II. In Vietnam, people served one tour, and then they came home. We had a draft. Now we ask people to go again and again. And so you have 1 million people who have been through the wars who are still in the military. You have 90,000 people who are still in Afghanistan fighting this war. It's not surprising that the suicides would be higher than the battlefield deaths at this
Bonnie
point.
Carroll, I want to ask you about a recent controversy involving Major General Dana Pittard, a commander at Fort Bliss. Last month, he wrote on his blog, quote, "I am personally fed up with soldiers who are choosing to take their own lives so that others can clean up their mess. Be an adult, act like an adult, and deal with your real-life problems like the rest of us." The posting was retracted, but Pittard never apologized. He still commands one of the Army's largest units. Bonnie Carroll, your response.
I met with the director of the Army staff actually that day, and I can tell you that is not the sentiment shared by Army leadership, and it certainly isn't the sentiment shared by the leadership across the armed services. General Pittard is a good man, and that was a very, very unfortunate statement that was made, and I'm grateful that he has retracted it. What we've seen across the services is a transformation in culture. The Marine Corps has done an extraordinary job of transforming boot camp training so that right in the first 2 weeks of that recruit training, these young Marines are told that suicide is a potential in their lives, that they may become so surrounded by challenges that they may become desperate and feel that their own death is the only way out. They equate that to what a warrior may experience in combat when they're surrounded by the enemy, and they normalize help-seeking behavior. We've seen a 10% drop in suicide in the Marine Corps because of this program. I just want to commend the Commandant for extraordinary work in this regard.
These issues which were pointed out under the Bush administration have begun to be remedied to some extent in the Obama administration, but the problems persist.
But if there's been such a transformation in the military culture with respect to mental problems, why has the rate of suicide gone up so much in this year, in 2012, relative to 2011 and 2010?
Well, I don't think that it should be surprising that the suicide rate would increase if we look at the fact that the number of soldiers who have gone through the war has increased. And as Kevin was pointing out, the amount of resources available to returning soldiers continues to be insufficient to meet that need. We also have, I might say, as Aaron Hughes, the Iraq War veteran who began this segment, large numbers of soldiers still deploying to the wars who have actually served previous tours and are deployed on psychotropic medications to Afghanistan. I mean, just imagine you're holding an M16 or another, military-issued firearm. You have a scary situation all around you, and you're on drugs that affect your ability to respond to certain situations. It's a very difficult situation, but I didn't want to undermine what Bonnie was saying, which is that the military has done a tremendous amount in recent years, but we see the evidence in the rising suicide rate that has not actually solved the problem.